All right, this is your pitch at about 82. We're gonna take you into leg lift. You can see you shift really well. I think you've done this well, but you're already in a position to where you're opening. So if I grab this tool right here, hip line, shoulder line, see your hip is already here. And it might change, but a lot of pitchers are starting to counter rotate. I mean, elite pitchers are starting to counter rotate the hips, and you're already starting to open it. And you can see your front femur, it's already starting to open. Yeah. And your front knee is already past your front hip. A lot of elite guys are actually going the other way at that point, right? Because you want to delay rotation. The moment you start rotation, it's too hard to really drive linear, because it's this femur back here to keep pushing laterally down the mound, because once you spin, it just wants to turn. It's harder to push, is when this opens. So if you open, then this gets in a position where it just wants to rotate. If you keep it closed, now you allow that momentum to build even better. Let's see right here. So you can see right there, your hips already still, it's a little bit more open. So you never really counter rotated. You wanted to open a little bit too early. I think the good thing is, even though your front femur started to open up, you threw your heel out and it internally rotated you, which then blocked off your front leg from wanting to fly open. So I like that move late. I think it would help to get initially out of your leg lift to start learning to counter rotate more, because it's going to create a more violent drive through your hips when you get to front push right. So these are things that just add more power to the delivery. Mm-hmm. My two favorite graphs are kinematic sequencing and linear kinematic sequencing. So this shows us, so this shows you how you're timing your movements. So this is crazy, because go back on my Instagram, look at George. George is like a 3 and almost a 9. So he's almost 3 meters per second faster than you, which is like saying you're going 40 miles an hour and he's going, 70 miles an hour. Like, it's just considerably faster. Yeah. You'd never compete with that guy, right? Yeah. And you can see his peaks are so much wider. So this is your linear kinematic sequencing. This is your hip. Red line is your hip pushing forward and how fast they push forward. And this is your trunk pushing forward and how fast they push forward. We don't see a separation. We see them going off together right here. Yeah. So you don't see a separation. You'd want to see this pop and that to pop, and it's like throwing it's hard to, not many guys know this, but like a trebuchet. I can't think of a simpler understanding of a trebuchet. Yeah. You throw the first lever, and then the second lever accelerates on top of that, right? So when you're together, it's like you throwing one lever. When you're separated, it's like you're throwing 2 levers. So exponentially, it's considerably more velocity at the end of that lever, right? So when you're synced up like this, you're not using that extra segment. And you can see it too here in angular. So this is rotational sequencing. This is linear. So I always say, this is rotational sequencing. This is linear sequencing, right? And you can see here your hips are barely rotating. Yeah. So I think all that good momentum you got, it's going nowhere. But you opened up. You got momentum. You got the linear peak, great linear peak. The 3.4 is a great linear peak. But you didn't get an angular peak, right? Because you were already opening too early. So if you would have counter-rotated and held that and then been more aggressive with that, you get this angular peak of rotation, which, we're trying to get the best of both. We're trying to get peak rotational speed, and we're trying to get peak linear speeds, combination, right? And then you can see here, they're stacking too. So as much as in this position, I'm seeing separation. Positionally, you're putting your body in separation, which is great. But it's not peaking there. So when you go to drive and then put energy through it, the peaks are coming together. So the hips peaking right there, and then the trunk's right behind it, peaking. As opposed to positionally separating, peaking the hips way ahead, and then peaking the trunk way later would be exponentially greater in the velocity at the end, right? So here's the thing. We were looking at the delivery from the eye, going, you're doing a lot of things that elite pitchers do. But when we're looking at it in the graphs and the metrics of the speeds, we can see it's not. We can see it's very average, right? It's not sequencing in separation, it's sequencing in sync together. And the overall speeds are pretty low. Like I said, George was at 90 with almost a 9 peak checks linear speed. And angular velocity wise on the chest, the trunk, it's going to be something more 1,200 to maybe 1,500, and you're under 1,000. So once again, you're jogging like Usain Bolt. You're not sprinting. You're just not putting the force and speed through your body at that level. So I think this is just huge for you because it's showing you speeds and how you're sequencing those speeds. And positionally, you're Linsky, and you've been putting yourself in the right place. We're just not accelerating well through it.
Maybe you don't have the power you can't.
Yeah, right, exactly. And then, like I said, we were talking about if you don't peak that hip and you hit front foot, and you can see that hip in angular, it wasn't fully rotated, as we can see. So that means this back hip is back here. And so that means you didn't thrust it up. So now, when the hip is being kind of dragged back a little bit, this gets tucked in, and now you don't really have that dynamic finish there that you can see is not happening at all. We wanna hit and use that front leg to drive more of that energy up the chain. You're not getting there because you're leaving all this behind. It's not firing up in the front foot shred. And then because of that, here at pitch release, decent forward trunk tilt, and that would help it, but not a lot of forward trunk tilt. So if we come out of this and we look at chest position orientation, your forward position is 13 degrees. So actually that's poor. An elite guy would be 45 degrees out here. And his front leg would be helping that and getting extended. Because if that front leg is getting extended, it's abducting your hip, it's tipping your hip forward, and that's pushing your trunk out. High correlation of the trunk forward position to velocity. I mean, two things. High velocity pitchers got their trunk more forward, and they got their arm more laid back. And the act of laying the arm back and having more external rotation allows the trunk to go farther, which is like the meat of the whip, carrying more energy up the chain. So, and you're very limited there, and that would be considerable. So where does that power come from? It comes up the chain. So that peak and that drive and all that energy through your sequences would explode that trunk out even more and put more speed into the ball. You don't over-rotate, meaning if I look contralateral, you're at 22 degrees. Your trunk rotation is perfect. I love your posture. It's perfect. It's aligned perfectly. I mean, everything is precise of where you need to be. You're not pulling your glove side. You're not way over here. You're not dragging your arm as much. You just don't have a lot of energy moving your trunk forward. So that's all a plus. It's just, I mean, you're a guy really prepared and set up for 90 plus. You are. You just need the power to move it. Because if I took this frame and I pushed more energy through it, I think the only thing I'd have to do positionally is counter-rotate the hip so it doesn't want to go so early. If I counter-rotated your hip as you got all that good momentum, and I gave you the ability to power more energy through it, you'd be 95 tomorrow. Because biomechanically, it's set to do that. Now, it's just the time it's going to take to put that kind of power in your body, build that kind of power.